Hello and welcome to the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, and on today's show I am joined by Mr. Kasper Van Der Meulen. Now, Kasper was introduced to me by my BJJ coach Phil, and let's just say it was a great introduction because this is an awesome podcast episode. We really get into the weeds of what it takes to be a man that's focused in today's modern age. And it honestly is one of my favourite podcasts that I've recorded so far. It is a real connection between Kasper and I, not in that way, that we really kind of get into what we believe, and it's a really awesome episode. But before we kind of get on with the show, I just want to let you know that every single podcast I do from now on is going to be streamed live in my free Facebook group, the Alpha Athletes Page 2.0. So if you head to facebook.com, I'm not going to give you the long numbers, but if you just search Alpha Athletes Page 2.0, you shall find my free group, Request Access, and you can stream the podcast live and ask questions to the guests live as we record the show. So hopefully see you in there and enjoy the show with Mr. Kasper Van Der Meulen.
I am good. I am very happy to be on the show. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Well, I think we'll start off with one of the conversations we were having before we started recording, and it went something like this. Right, when do you want to come on the show? And then you said, I'm going to go back out into the woods and out of the Wi-Fi zone now, and I'll be back in a couple of days. What's that story that got you to that point?
Well, it's a very important thing that I'm working on myself and that I'm writing about is the idea of rewilding. So the idea that we as humans are now in a very domesticated version of how we might be. So getting in touch with the cold, realigning your senses with natural surroundings, kind of de-escalating from the fast and loud life of the city. Those kinds of things, learning to eat from nature, learning to be in nature and trusting your own abilities. I think those are, for me, some very important aspects to keeping a fresh and healthy mind, and also to disconnect from the all the hurries and the worries from modern day life.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small city in the Netherlands.
Okay. Was it busy? Was it quite a quiet childhood?
My childhood wasn't as quiet. But, I didn't have a lot of fun going to school, and I also I got in trouble in the school system pretty quickly, and so it was a very quiet neighborhood, a very safe neighborhood to grow up in, and there was a forest very close by where I could just go. That was very good for me in a lot of senses. But there were a lot of things that bothered me from the school system, from the normal way of social conduct in schools, and the way that schoolyards are very oftentimes like almost like feeding grounds for people with a negative mindset, preying on the weak, that kind of thing. So yeah. I was one of the real wilding things that I'm doing now is trying to go outside and play outside like I used to. Like for example, now I've been getting in touch with the cold again through the Wim Hof method. I have been climbing trees, walking outside on my bare feet, moving like an animal, all that kind of things. And I'm now trying to get back into the child mind state that I had in the times when my childhood was all happy and good. But also, I've seen quite some struggle at a quite young age, and that's still one of the sources of inspiration that I draw from.
Do you mind talking about that struggle, or is it something you'd rather keep away from?
Well, it's interesting now that a year or two ago, I would never speak about these things as freely as I do now. And so I started, writing about the topics of mental fitness and about personal improvement, and automatically also started speaking about them and giving workshops, and I used to be a science teacher, and I would always have, in my mentorship classes, I would speak about these topics and going through struggles. And now my life has kind of gotten into a very open space where people can very easily follow me and see what I'm doing. They want to hear about me. And I find myself more and more, well, not easily, but I'm getting more and more used to the idea of sharing my personal story. not because necessarily I want to share it, but because I've seen the value in sharing stories like that, and the way that people can connect to other people from all over the globe nowadays and be uplifted by people who are willing to tell the story. And of course, the difference is also that I speak about these things in a very professional way. I know how to use the story to make a point or to explain a certain principle. It's not like I'm going out there and, sobbing and being like, oh, this happened and that happened. But for example, interestingly, I've just finished the English edition of my book that has been out for like 1.5 years. And in the new English edition, 1.5 years later, I've actually written in some of the origin stories from my childhood that I was completely uncomfortable with sharing a year and a half ago, and that I've now written into the very first introduction part that basically starts with me having a panic attack in my own backyard because I've gotten out of 3 years of drug addiction when I'm 15. So I was very young into mental distress and mild drug addiction, like 12 or 13 years old, and I've had a lot of very interesting experience there in learning about mental distress, but also mental fitness, meditation, about learning about how to control my mind through martial arts and those kind of things. So I do tell that story now, which is one of the scariest moments in my life. But I tell it in a way that I know it's going to make a point, and it's going to. There's going to be people out there that are going to be helped by it, and that's something that I love. And I encourage other people to tell their stories in that way, and so I should be the example of that.
Do you mind telling that story now?
Well, it was kind of a pivotal moment of insight so the short version is that I had, when I was 12 or 13, I had bullies and stuff going on. I was in bad shape mentally and physically. There was, in my direct social environment, there was some aggression, some depression, some addiction. And actually, interestingly, the more I tell this story and the more I hear people react to it, I'm starting to realize that I wasn't at all in a special place. I'm not an outlier for being a teenager surrounded by misery. I meet people all the time who have stories like this. That's one of the main reasons I need to tell it. So anyway, I wanted to escape. I found, smoking pot and being intoxicated as the most available option at the time. And I was not sober for a number of years. And then I came to a point where I started to notice that it wasn't good for me, and I completely disconnected from the entire social environment that I had of just negative people on the way to do bad stuff. I completely went cold turkey on anything. Like I went completely kind of straight edge, no meat, no animal at all, no caffeine, no tea. So I went from one extreme of the spectrum to the other extreme. But what that taught me is that if you if you suppress a lot of things in a young, active mind, and then you stop suppressing it, all of that stuff needs to still be processed. So I went into a period where I was free from all the drugs and all the substances, but I still couldn't go to school because I was basically, I felt like I was losing my mind because everything was so intense. And so it's a pretty heavy period. But then one day I felt good and I decided to go to school. And the moment that I stepped out of my house, my entire physiology shifted from being fairly okay and wanting to go to school to full-blown panic attack. So I felt my heart racing, adrenaline pumping, my breathing was accelerating, and sweaty palms, all of it. And I couldn't cope, and I took a step back to the house, and suddenly I was fine. I was like, hey, that was interesting. No, I'm fine, so let's go. And then I decided to go back to school again, and suddenly the panic started again. And I went back and forth a few times, and so the thing the reason that I tell this story is that in that moment, I had a moment of clarity where I could observe myself having a mental intention of taking a step towards the scary thing, and my physiology shifting completely. And then I had the intention of not doing the scary thing, and my physiology shifted back. And that was a key insight that I'm still learning from, because what that basically meant was my mind, my mental intention, the way I look at life is a tool. And if I use it, so I can use it in different ways. I can learn to use it in different ways. So what kind of unveiled itself to me in that moment was the power of the mind. The fact that just the thought of going to school would completely mess up my physiology, and the thought of not going to school would make me feel completely fine. And then I was like, what if I can use that tool in the exact same way, but in a different direction that I want? So what if I could use that stress response, because I knew about what stress was. I wasn't going to school, but I was still a science nerd, so I'd figured a lot of stuff out. I spent most of my time not going to school, watching like documentaries and actually learning more than I probably would have when I was in school. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. What if I can learn to go from mental intention to big physiological response, big manifestation in a positive way, in a way that I wanted? And that kind of got me into the field of meditation, of Zen, martial arts, and those kind of things. And that's actually what I do now. Like a panic attack, raised heart rate, increased metabolism, I can just turn that on whenever I want to go, for example, into an ice bath. So my point was proven. Yeah. It's been a long road, but it's pretty awesome.
Do you think those negative experiences or hard experiences are necessary to get to a point of control?
In my case, yes.
Okay.
I hope that it's not the case for everybody. I hope that the things that I'm doing now, having some people call it like superhuman skills, but I think they're very superhuman in a sense that they're extremely human, not more than human, not above human. Having this amount of focus, having this control over physiology, living a lifestyle of freedom and adventure. I sincerely hope that those can be reached without going through periods of very intense distress. I have a little girl now. I have a daughter. She's 10 months old, and I really hope that I can show her this life, this way of living, and these skills without her having to have the necessity of extreme mental distress in order to get there. But my experience is that most of the people that I meet that can do these kinds of things and live a lifestyle of freedom and of skill and of focus and awareness are usually people that have learned about these things from periods of distress or depression or bad health or those kind of things.
In the months and years following the panic attack, what happened in that time?
Well, it was interesting. It was a big epiphany, but it didn't exactly give me all of the tools I needed. So I never went back to abusing drugs. I still smoked. I was pretty overweight. But one very important thing actually that happened is that I met this girl. I was 17, she was 15, and now 13, 14 years later, we're married, which is good. And that was a big thing. The fact that I found like my kind of like my soulmate that allowed me to be myself, to work on myself. And she was also coming from a very difficult period. And that was a very key factor in me being able to stay the course. And I did stay the course. It was ups and downs. But interestingly, spending a few years, I was going to stay out on the streets. It wasn't that bad, but doing things that are associated with a higher age. I was just hanging around on the streets at night between like drug dealers and people that were twice my age, and bums and junks, and coming from a period. It was not all the time, of course, but I've seen some pretty intense stuff while I was misbehaving myself. Having seen a period like that gave me perspective on what normal life was supposed to be like. And basically what happened is that I went through a search for freedom. I discovered music as the most important and most effective way to express myself, to be creative, to innovate, and to live a life that is more fit for what I needed. By the way, is there something going on in the background? I can hear.
Okay, wait. Cool. Sorry,
Yeah.
carry on then.
Yeah, let me skip back in this story. So anyway, after that pivotal moment, I started looking for ways. Actually, this is a much better answer. I've restructured my thoughts. After that pivotal moment in my backyard of observing the panic attack, I started basically looking for ways to integrate that principle that I learned of regarding the mind as a tool into my life. I started getting into music. I started getting into meditation, into martial arts. I started moving more. I met the girl of my dreams, which I'm now married to. We decided to go on a path of, well, we didn't really decide to go on a path of personal improvement, but we were both in a social environment of people that were doing really badly with their lives. They were not enjoying themselves. They were depressed. They were increasingly getting into more bad stuff. I've never had I've never wanted to do anything bad. I just wanted to, lay in the grass and smoke weed and be nice to everybody. But a lot of my friends couldn't really understand. They were kind of drawn into a much, much darker life of basically becoming, drug dealers and criminals. And I never wanted to associate with that. I've always had a very strong moral compass in doing the right things. And so did my girlfriend, who is now my wife. And we decided to walk away from that entire social environment and to look for ways to live the life that we wanted. So what I learned is to regard the way you live, the results in your life, the quality of life as something that is a product from the choices that you make and the willingness to practice. And I kind of dedicated my life to that in those years. So music was a big thing for me. Things like meditation, starting to move more. And a lot of things that I do now flourished from that period.
How did you find music?
The first thing was that I was hanging around in parks a lot with friends, and there were guys playing drums, like djembes, African drums, and I was intrigued. When I was born, my parents lived in Africa, in Western Africa, and apparently I had heard some of that when I was in my mother's womb and in the first few months of my life when we lived in Western Africa. I don't know, it resonated with me somehow. And at a certain point, I decided to just buy a drum and to play on it. And interestingly, I would just grab the drum and, I let my hands go and I had no idea what I was doing. But afterwards, my brain would feel completely recharged. It's really interesting to me. So I would start going to jam sessions and play with other people, and then people were really impressed with my level of playing, even though I didn't take any lessons. And that was something that was really interesting to me, that this kind of came out of me. And I decided to go also to look for ways to incorporate that into my life and to find ways to feel more of what I felt during making music, to get into that flow. I think that was my first experience with actual flow state, with actual dedicated focus, creative awareness. And it led me to wanting to learn everything that there was about music. I learned to play several different instruments. I started to write lyrics. I started to perform as a rapper. I've actually done that for a very long time. But also at a very early age, when I was 17, I started to teach music in my own business, because I was asked by people to come and teach about these drums, or to teach rap to kids in schools, or to street kids, or to whatever kind of place they wanted me. I would go and I would try to make music with people. And it was very interesting to me how everybody was completely capable of making music at a pretty high level, as long as they would set their mind to be open, to be creative, and to not judge the music that they were making. So it was really interesting to me how everybody has this idea of, I can't make music, I can't sing, it sounds bad, or, they've been judged on their ability to be creative. And then if you take them out of that mindset and put them in a setting where they're allowed to be creative and free from judgment, then suddenly they start to make beautiful music. Everybody. And I even actually once taught music to a deaf girl when I was 18 or 19. And that was a very interesting adventure to me, because she was able to make music, and I figured she was supposed to be disabled. She wasn't supposed to be able to make music. But then she kind of took me by the hand and she taught me how to teach her music, and that was a very, very interesting moment. So kind of like the common factor in all of those different things and stories that I've just told is the idea that people are, like, everybody's inherent worth and ability is similar, but the manner in which they can set their mind to being in that state is differs from person to person and is dependent on the amount of practice that they've put into getting into those states.
Okay.
So I hope that's kind of a congruent conclusion to that very segueing
Yeah.
story.
I suppose the logical question from that point is, how do you regularly get into that state? How do you find your flow state?
Well, the state of flow or creative focus or being mindful or whatever you want to call it is, I think, a matter of a few different things. The first is dedicated practice, which means find practices, things that you can, like skills that you can hone that get you into that state. So it's a skills-based approach. Secondly is providing the right circumstances for your brain to function properly, optimally, in the best case. And also to allow things to happen instead of making them happen. So creating the circumstances, practicing, and not trying to be something that you're not, but trying to do the things that you want to do. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, I suppose it does. It definitely does. Where did actually? Let's start with this. How did you start moving more? What was the initial steps for that?
So a few years ago, actually before I went into that period of misconduct, when I was around 12 or 13, I was one of the best basketball players in the country. We won national championship and all of that happened. And I used to play basketball 20 to 30 hours a day, but then I got injured. I was very young. I was growing very fast, and my coaches would always push me to the max because, I was skilled. They were like, if this guy gets enough practice, he could be a pro player. But then that kind of pushed me over the edge of getting injured and not being able to play anymore. And that was one of the things that led me to do other things, because I had 20 or 30 hours instead of practicing basketball. I had time on my hands, and, so I just started doing bad stuff. But, and it really locked in the idea of me, like, my knees are bad, my back is bad, I'm overweight, I can't move anymore, I can't do anything. Then a few years ago, when I was working in education, I kind of got burnt out, and I was still overweight, and I was still smoking, and I wasn't feeling well. And that was 5 or 6 years ago. I weighed 80 pounds more than I do now. I was in bad shape. I would have back problems. I would have migraines, bad stuff, all lifestyle related. Then I went to see a few different therapists and doctors trying to find the solution to my problems, because I was also having like heart arrhythmia problems and anxieties and everything, and nothing would work. And then I met a hypnotherapist, and he helped me with, I then called it hypnosis. I now realize that it's basically a guided meditation, but he helped me with guided meditations to get a grip on all of my mental chaos, and to treat my mind as a tool and to train it to work as a tool for me. And it was very effective for me, and I learned a lot, and I worked through some issues, and I was finally able to really gain conscious control over my mental chatter. And then after a few sessions, I was feeling much better, and I was ready to move on. And then he said to me, "Do you work out? Do you move?" And I was like, "Is he calling me fat?" But he said, "Sound body, sound mind." And I was like, "He's right. Sound body, sound mind." And that kind of became my first mantra or affirmation. And I didn't know exactly how to start or what to do. And I figured that the easiest thing that I could do was to just put on some sports shoes and go outside and run. And I could only run for 2 or 3 minutes before I was completely, destroyed. And my lungs were heaving and all that stuff. But it made my mind feel good in a way, to feel exhausted. It was like my body telling my mind, like, hey, it's almost like we were built for this. It was a very good feeling. A running meditation, because I'd always had trouble with doing formal meditation, but when running, I would get the sensation of meditating and feel very good. So I just started expanding everything that worked. I kept running. I started incorporating some strength training, doing some pull-ups. It was only like 4 years ago when I started. And then a friend of mine actually pointed out that there was going to be a tough a mud race, like an obstacle race, Scotland. And I was like, that would be a really cool kind of thing to really prove to myself that I can actually do this, that I'm getting fit, that I'm starting to move again. And that's when I started, really training, being serious about it, mastering one pull-up. Took me months, being able to run a few kilometers without being completely destroyed, fixing my back problems, my shoulder problems, and I've kept moving from there.
One of the things that I saw it's the first time I've ever seen it, and it was in one of your videos. You was using weighted juggling balls. Where did that come from? And how do you use those?
Well, juggling is one of those things that I've found to be a very effective way to boost your focus and to improve your mental fitness, which is my field of work, which is what my book is about. I really enjoyed juggling, but I didn't really enjoy learning new tricks, but I was looking for a way to kind of make a bigger challenge out of it. And also, I realized that it was, so somebody had, I used to have these ankle weights that I wore around my legs when I was playing basketball. I just had them laying around in the attic, and I noticed like, hey, this feels like a weight I might be able to juggle. So I just tried it, and it worked. And it was relatively easily. And then I started looking for bigger weights because it felt good. It felt like my shoulder mobility was improving. And then I suddenly started realizing that I'm not super good at juggling. It's not something I could be the best at, and I'm not super strong. Like, I'm not going to be the strongest person in the world. But then maybe if I combine the two, there might be, and this is where the competition mindset came in, there might be a Guinness World Record that I could break. Like, if I combine two things that I'm mildly good at, but I might be one of the first people who thought of combining them in that way, I might be able to set a world record. So I started looking in. I went and kind of into like this Google binge of looking for records that I might be able to break, and I figured out that there's one record for this weighted juggling, highest weight juggled, and it seemed like it might be within my reach. So I started looking for heavy juggling balls, heavy options, and I found that the biggest weight of balls that were produced were 5 kilograms, so I just bought those. It's a really cool thing, by the way. It's really, especially for focus, because if you use like full metal juggling balls that weigh 10 pounds each, then every catch has to be good. You really can't afford to lose focus for 1 second, because if it falls on your toe, or you get your finger between two balls, or it lands on your shoulder, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, at first I looked at it and I didn't see the weight there. And I thought, that's a weird thing to put in a routine. I was like, actually, no, that is really, really switched on. I really liked it. Like, as you said, it's the focus, the clarity, the skill component. And I really, really like that.
Yeah, and so the thing is about, people ask me about how can you train to find your innate abilities, to be in the flow state, to live a lifestyle of freedom. How is that a skill-based approach? And then I go, well, learn how to juggle. And then I go, what? Why should I learn how to juggle? Or I tell them, go learn to sit in an ice bath. And they go, what? Why? No, I want to deal with my real-life problems right now. But one very effective thing that I'm working with that has been very effective to me and the people I work with is that you train yourself to do difficult things. So you create training stimuli where you create a necessity to be focused, to be aware, to be completely, to align all of your abilities. So, for example, being in an ice bath or being in a cold shower, losing focus means getting very cold. So you have a very strong stimulus that trains your mind to pay to pay your attention in a very focused way. And the same thing goes for juggling weighted balls for running. Running for me has always been a practice of training my focus, to be able to ignore the voice of doubt to be able to ignore minor discomfort or pains or exhaustion, and to keep my mind to control. Well, control is not the right way, but to set my mind to pay attention to the things that I find important, to pay attention to the things that are helpful. And weighted juggling is a great way to do that. And the same thing is in a deadlift. If you're going to pick up a very heavy weight from the floor, then the voice of doubt starts to produce excuses to not do it instantly. It starts to produce doubts, and that's going to have your nervous system and your muscles and everything completely destroyed under the weight. So you're not going to be able to do it. So I use all of those different things. Some of them are pretty much out of the ordinary, like juggling weighted balls. And I use them to optimize my focus, to train the mental tool of paying attention to the things that I want to pay attention to. And that is a general life skill that is, one, not being trained a lot in the modern world. And secondly, the thing that we need most in modern life.
Yeah, that's really kind of affirmed a lot of what I think, actually. The specifically the focus and developing the focus through hardship, but other tools as well. When you think of the physical challenges that you've completed now, what's the first one that springs to mind?
It is, to me, well, the physical challenges. They're all challenges.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I wanted to do is, so coming from being completely out of shape, being mildly out of shape, and training for my first Tough Mudder, that was 2012. I decided that I wanted to be able. So I wanted to work on my endurance and my strength. So I figured I'll run an ultra marathon and I will lift twice my body weight in the same week, because that was one of those things where people said, you're either a runner or you lift heavy. And I was like, no, I'm doing both, because I can, I think. So I did that. So last year I ran the Eiger Ultra Marathon, which is a 51 kilometer, 3,000 meters of elevation, and in the mountains in Switzerland. It's an amazing thing. It broke me in all possible ways, and it completely built me up in all possible ways. I absolutely loved it. And then the week after that, I lifted twice my body weight, which is 160 kilograms. And that was it made me feel like I can finally move. Like I've proven the point. I've taken on the challenge, and, I have endurance and I have strength, and wow, I can move. And then somebody said, oh, can you? Well, why don't you go sit in a resting squat, actually? And I was like, resting squat? No, I can squat more than my body weight in my shoulders. Like, no, just sit down in a resting squat. And I tried, and I fell over. I was like, you can't move for shit. I was like, I can run up a mountain, 50 kilometers, 8 hours of nonstop running, and I can lift twice my body weight. You're telling me I can't move? And I was like, you can't even sit in a resting squat. You can't move. I was like, man, I need to change my perspective on movement.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a big eye opener.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that's what led you towards more gymnastics type work and handstands and things like that. Yeah. How did that come about? Yeah.
Well, so one of the things I started to do is I got really interested. So I've been in some mental and physical distress in my life, but I don't really work in that spectrum. So I always say, like, I went from minus 100 to 0 pretty effectively through some therapy, through running, through meditation, all these things. But then I decided, what if I just keep climbing? I climbed out of the hole. Now I'm on level ground with being normal. I still smoked a bit, was still a bit overweight, but it was normal. And that was surprising to me, how I still felt like people tell me I'm normal, like I'm done. You don't have to improve your health anymore. And I was like, but what? This is normal? I don't like normal and average anymore. So I decided to just keep climbing and see how I could get from the zero, from the baseline of normal health towards the plus 100 in a sense. And I started looking for ways to get there. And one of the things I encountered was the Wim Hof method, which focuses on breathing techniques and cold exposure, and also like mindset and focus training in order to reach optimal health. And one of the components in there was some yoga moves, some very advanced but simple yoga moves, like a headstand or a crow pose, or like the peacock or the shelf pose. And I wasn't really into it, but I noticed that the more I incorporated those movements, those static holds, and the poses into my training, that my running would improve because my stability would improve, and my lifting would improve because, I was developing attributes of flexibility and mobility instead of just strength and endurance. And that was really interesting to me, the idea that you can use your own body to train wherever you are, and also to make it very playful. A part of my rewilding practice is also doing animal movements, climbing trees, being able to do human skills. And what I've now started to realize is that the things that I would regard as optimal health or optimal physical strength are actually very normal human things to do, like sitting in a resting squat, being able to walk or to run on your own bare feet. Like people say run bare feet, and they use the word barefoot as a different word for shoe. But I always tell people, like, learn to run on your own damn feet. Learn to stand on your own feet and be balanced. Learn to run on your own feet and not be injured after 5 minutes of running. Learn to hang from your own hands. Learn to pull yourself up, to be able to climb, to swim, to do all of these basic movements that are supposed to be attributes of normal physical human ability. So I really like this more human slogan that I think CrossFit or some other, some brand coined that.
Yeah, maybe Reebok or someone like that.
Yeah, Reebok. Yeah, that's it. But it resonated with me to be more human. The fact that being in a cold environment and not catching hypothermia, being focused in surroundings of natural extremities like cold or like altitude, or learning how to guide your nervous system into optimal performance by changing the way you breathe. All these very simple things, I feel that they should be part of the normal skill set of any human.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the worrying thing is that the ability to do 5 pull-ups, for example, or the ability to run, or the ability to just to move as you're designed to move, is now viewed as something abnormal and something. Yeah. Oh, look at this person is fit. No, they're at the standard that you should be at, and I think that's it's important.
That's what I think now. Yeah. So to answer your question, is that what led me to doing gymnastics training and to do, the Ido Portal style of training, is looking for my limitations. So, and that's been the big thing in my life ever since I had that epiphany of learning to control my mind, is that what are the things that are most difficult, most limited in my life? What are the things that I've learned about what I can or can't do? What are the things where my body and my mind stop functioning? And to look for those things, to look for those boundaries, and then to work with them. So when I was out of shape, I couldn't lift my elbow above my shoulder because, I kind of messed up my shoulder doing some wrong movements, not sleeping well, and I just couldn't move my arm normally. I was a young guy. I was 25 years old. I couldn't move my arm. I couldn't run to the bus to catch the bus. Now I just skip the whole bus and just run the whole thing. And so the willingness to look for the most difficult things and then to learn to do them anyway. That was what led me to this type of movement, to direct my body in the shape and in the way that I decide to direct it, instead of just being a slouchy couch potato and being in the comfort zone as much as possible.
We've kind of skirted around the issue and alluded to the issue, or not the issue, the topic of Wim Hof. So how did the Wim Hof method come into your life?
Actually, a few years ago when I was teaching a science class, I would every now and then, or actually pretty often, I would have these moments in the lesson where we would, together with the class, we would just open up YouTube on the Beamer screen, and then we would search for like amazing applications of science, or inspiring people doing inspiring things. We would watch YouTube videos of cool experiments or of scientific breakthroughs of people doing amazing things. And then we came across this snippet of a Discovery Channel thing, and it said the Iceman can conquer the cold and stay in the ice without any effort, blah blah blah. And then it said Wim Hof, and I was like, hey, that sounds like a Dutch name. So I kind of looked into it, and it was a Dutch guy, and he had all these amazing things that he did, all these records, and I kind of forgot about it after that class. But then, 2 years ago, I was reminded of it because he was back on TV and he was doing an amazing stunt somewhere. And I figured, well, this is something that I could work with because I had gotten some hypothermia during the Tough Mudder. I didn't have my layer of fat to keep me warm anymore. And also I was researching new ways to optimize mental and physical states and to do more than what is normal. So to go from 0 to 100 to reach my personal 100%. And I was thinking about writing a book about the topic. So I was researching different things and I was like, this is good, I'll go. I went to the workshop and I was absolutely amazed of what was possible in such a short amount of time and with such simple techniques. The whole topic of breathing is something that is not at all taught to us in any sports discipline, in any school or anywhere, except if you go to yoga or some Eastern martial arts, where also it's not discussed as such a specific topic. So that was really mind-blowing to me, the fact that by just adjusting my breathing, I could do much more than I would expect to be able to do. And I started researching it. I started working all of it out, and I decided to go into the instructor's course. So I learned everything about the method that there was to learn, and much, much more. I started to really get back into my love for science and dig into all of the different studies and all of the physiology, and I really connected all the dots. And it was completely in line with what I was doing because I was working on my physical health through optimizing my mental state. Researching all of these esoteric disciplines and practices, and it just fit in completely. And I decided to work with it, and it's added a lot to my life to be able to work with the cold, to not be impressed by extreme weather circumstances, to be able to guide my movement and my mental and physical abilities through my breath. And also, I've studied any kind of breath work that I could find in the meantime. And, it's a very cool field to work in because a lot of people are not working in that field. They're working on physical, they're working on mental, emotional, but they're not looking at using extreme natural stimuli like the cold or optimizing the breath in order to improve performance.
Do you remember the first time you used the breathing technique?
Yeah, it was in that workshop. And it was very interesting to me because I felt a lot of physical sensations that I had known from using substances. And that was really interesting to me. And of course, I already knew because I'm a trained biology teacher. I was already very into psychology and neuropsychology and meditation. So I kind of know how already knew how the limbic system in the brain has kind of like this medicine cabinet. And you're basically walking around with all of this stuff in your brain and also in your body that we're not always using optimally. And then suddenly I noticed that my body was reacting to changing my breathing, to doing that specific breathing technique in a way that was in a certain sense familiar to me, but it felt so incredibly healthy. It felt like, why haven't I been doing this for my entire life? So to be able to work with my physiology on that level was absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Is your meditation practice now separate from the Wim Hof method?
I'm now at a point where I switch all of those things around. So I have a lot of different kinds of breathing techniques. For me, it's no longer specific techniques. It's not like, now I'm doing this mindfulness meditation. Now I'm doing this type of breathing. Now I'm doing that. Now I'm doing the Wim Hof stuff. For me, in my personal practice, it has become a big toolbox of different mental tools that I can use, different breathing tools that I can use, different movement tools that I can use in order to get to a certain state. And I have a very strongly recognizable physical sensation that comes with my body being ready to start the day, my heart rate being variable, my pH levels being stabilized, my vagus nerve to be activated, my nervous system to be set to be kind of in a tone of which I know I want to have it. So I have a set of tools that I use to basically, well, it's not kind of like a reset, but to set my body into a certain state, to set my mind into a certain state. And I use different breathing techniques that are very strongly based in Wim Hof method, different meditation techniques, different movement practices that get me into that state. And then I start my day.
Nice. What does the perfect day look like for you?
So ideally, I would get up an hour before my 10-month-old daughter wakes up, which is 5 or 6 in the morning. Well, that's an hour before she wakes up. And if I have that first hour of the day to myself, then I can do all of my daily rituals in the morning. And that is absolutely changing the way that I have the entire day. So what I would normally do is I would have 5 or 10 minutes of just sitting down and shutting up, basically, Zen type of meditation, very simple, just sit down and shut up and be with the moment. Then I would go into some breathing practice, mostly Wim Hof method based, but also just some slow down breathing. I've been doing a lot of chanting, so where you use breathing combined with voice to kind of resonate in the body and to control the breath, something that I like to do. I have this Muse headband that I use. I take a moment to do a few breaths where I scan my heart rate variability. So I go through the motions of that until I reach that state. It's usually like 20 minutes. And then I feel great. Then I move around a bit. I usually do some mobility and flexibility work straight after that. I do some animal movements. I stand on my head. I do some stretching. Then I would ideally take an ice bath. So I have a permanent ice bath in my tool shed that I step into. I stay in there for a minute or 2 or 3 minutes, depending on what I want. Control my breath. Notice that my metabolism is kind of kicked up a notch. Get into that mental focus, that necessity to really focus and be present in the body. Then after that, I would go back into a bit of playful movement, mobility work. Sometimes I get on the trampoline. On the rebounder to kind of charge my lymphatic system to get to work, which works in perfectly with the breathing and meditation and ice bath work. And then I do some journaling and some mission statement work, as I call it. So I write journal style, but also I write on my ongoing mission statement of who am I, what am I doing in this world, what are the things I find important, what are the things I'm paying attention to. And that is, if I can have that hour, which I try to have as much as possible, then I've won the day. And then it's 7 a.m, and then my daughter wakes up and I play with her. So it's not like she's playing and I'm there, but I play with her. And that's something that I'm starting to learn, to get back into the child mind, to have that full hour of attention where, when she crawls, I crawl. When she tries to stand up and in a squatting motion, I join her. We crawl across the room, we play, and we look for new exciting adventures. And then when she goes into her first nap, I usually get to work, and I do 2 or 3 hours of intense, focused work that is guided by what I call working like an athlete. Some people know the Pomodoro technique, where you have, I make sets and reps for my concentration work. So I don't just sit there and try to answer all my email or try to finish my writing. I have 20 minutes, and that is my first set. And I go bam, 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 all of my focus in there. As soon as my timer goes, I stand up. I have 5 minutes to have a break. I juggle my weighted balls. I get on my trampoline. I stand on my head or whatever. I hang somewhere. I move. I do some pull-ups. I have this climb board where I train my grip strength, all of that stuff. And I have a few sets of that. So I do 20 minutes, completely focused, deep work, 5 minutes of break time. And I can do 2 or 3 hours of that very intense, concentrated work. Then I go into a workout. I do either, I now use GMB, so Gold Medal Bodies, GMB.io. I use their protocols now. I love them. Before, I used to do either a hill training, running, or do a powerlifting thing, or kind of like a calisthenics playful thing. Whatever I do, I make sure that I exert myself for an hour. Actually, I bought an Airdyne now.
Nice.
An amazing tool of destruction.
They're awful.
I heard somebody call it the devil's tricycle, which is very active. And I do interval training on that. So I do like a Tabata workout on that. So I have all of these options for movement. And I use my meditation session in the morning, my heart rate variability, the tone of my nervous system to determine how much I'm going to exert myself. So if I notice that my vagus nerve doesn't activate properly, that my heart rate isn't variable enough, I'm not going to do a full hour of intense interval training, but I will do some mobility, some flexibility and movement things. So this is definitely a practice that I'm also teaching a lot right now, because people are getting injured and burning out their bodies because they want to conform to a schedule that doesn't know how their nervous system is doing in terms of recovery. So I have an hour of that, and then I have breakfast. So I do intermittent fasting. I have my first meal after an intense workout session. I do all of my deep, important work before my first meal, because my concentration is very strongly linked to my digestion. And, that's a full day. I've done everything I can to work on my personal development, to be with my daughter, to run my business. And then it's like 1 or 2 p.m. And I have the rest of the day to do whatever comes up. So that's what an ideal day looks like. Sometimes it's different. But.
That's awesome. There's so many things you mentioned there that I'm really starting to see the value of, or not starting to see the value. I'm starting to see the value of applying them and the benefits that I'm getting from them, like the sets and the reps thing. It just makes so much sense for work, especially if you're your own boss. It really, really helps. Yeah. When you think of, or when you hear the word successful, who's the first person that pops into your head?
That's a really difficult one. Right now, it is actually Seth Godin, but that's because I saw your Facebook post of interviewing Seth Godin, and I absolutely love that guy. Just a week ago, I was thinking about what if I'm ever on the Tim Ferriss show, and he asked me that, what would I answer?
Don't tell everyone I'm stealing his questions.
No, it's not stealing a question. It's a very good question.
It's a good question.
It's a difficult question because, somebody like Seth Godin, like there's a few people like that. I like for example, Gary Vaynerchuk also. People like that who have a balance of mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, but also financial, material aspects of their life. Something that is something that I look to as success. So being able to live your life in the way you want to live it, and not compromising on any of those aspects. Because a lot of people think about success in terms of financial success. But I really feel that all of those fields and factors should be able to find their balance. In the same way that I meet a lot of people who are very spiritually and emotionally conscious and present, but their financial or business lives are completely down the drain, So I'm looking for that kind of balance. And so I think my mind is now primed by that post, but from listening to the way he speaks, I feel like he's a very aligned person. And also, my grandfather, my mother's father, was a perfect example of somebody like that. He was a doctor, but he was trained as a traditional doctor, traditional medicine. But he had a very holistic approach. He lived in a very small village, and he was always doing good wherever he went. So he had kind of like this spontaneous way of doing the right thing everywhere he went. He aligned his financial stuff. He did a lot of charity. He did a lot of, he really worked on healing people and also the communities around the people in that small village setting. He was kind of like a hero. And it's that kind of thing that I'm looking for, that balance, that way of finding optimal expression of your own abilities, and then almost naturally using that to help other people to improve the quality of their lives.
Nice. That's the perfect answer.
Tim Ferriss, by the way. Tim Ferriss is also an answer to that question.
Yeah.
He's asking the question. I was thinking if he ever interviews me, I'm not going to say, well, you, because that would be really...
Yeah.
But, Tim Ferriss, just living that lifestyle of being free, and I think Wim Hof and Laird Hamilton are also examples of these new modern day people that their success is not linked to their bank account, but to their the way that they are the most full expression of their own being.
Yeah, definitely. I think Joe Rogan fits into that category quite nicely as well. Very kind of spiritually aware, like very successful, like done lots of things. So I think he's a cool person to be in that category. But I completely agree with you about Seth as well.
Yeah, and also the ability to. So now we're kind of in an era where the ability to be open and to show the vulnerable sides of who you are, like in this new world of hyperconnection and communication, you are allowed and able to communicate the story of your life very openly and honestly, and really able to spread a message or a mission. So that's also why I came up with Gary Vaynerchuk. Like, he's this very hyperactive guy, and he swears all the time and all of that. But what he's really doing is he's telling a story, showing an example of a life that you could live if you're willing to do things. And I've noticed working together with Wim Hof, because I train all of his instructors as well, and I've been able to get to know him. Like Wim, he shows people a way of living life that is available to people. So the fact that he is so free and so able to connect to his child mind, to be playful, but also to help the world in a very meaningful way, that is something that is possible. It is possible to show that life, to live, instead of saying this is how it should be done and look at how successful I am, to lead by example in a world that needs that example. And all of the examples that we've just discussed are very important. And in that sense, also, I've learned a lot from Brené Brown. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her.
No.
Okay. So she has this TED Talk called The Power of Vulnerability, and she has this book called The Power of Vulnerability, and that is about how being vulnerable, showing up, letting yourself be seen, telling the story of your life is one of the boldest things you can do. And to be able to innovate, to be able to create, you have to be vulnerable. And there is absolutely no strength without vulnerability. There is no success without having at least felt that period of not being successful, right? So she uses the term wholeheartedness to explain also all of those aspects of your life and of your personality being allowed to exist and to coexist. And that success is we no longer have this kind of 90s view of success, like, oh, he has all the money, he has all the girls, he has all the cars, woohoo, go, turbo. But more of living a wholehearted life where all of these aspects, also the difficult stuff, also the bad stuff, the scary stuff, it is all allowed to be there. And this is something that people are ready for, and the people who communicate in that way are becoming the most successful, like Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss or all those kinds of people. And I've noticed the more that I'm getting comfortable in telling that story in that way to my crowd, the people that are interested in my story, the more my business life, but also my emotional life, my relationships, all flourish on the fact that I'm, communicating about this lifestyle of freedom.
I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on all the things we can talk about. I've been thinking about like heart rate variability and like the dichotomy between technology and like rewilding, and I've been thinking about Zen, and like I've got a list of things here that I want to go through. But I think the last kind of point I want to check in on is, what's your idea on the concept of Zen?
Aha. Do you want to continue for 7 hours? No. I saw this thing online where one of the most renowned Zen teachers totally forgot his name right now, blanking on his name, but he was asked to do a lecture on Zen for some university. And the entire lecture consisted of him saying, Zen is very difficult. And then he just sat there for 2 hours. Very complicated. I've studied Zen a lot, and I read a lot of Zen books, and I've sat in Zen meditations a lot. The most that I've learned about Zen from books, at least, the most that I've learned about Zen is from actually sitting and being present with whatever is there. But the book that has been very important to me is called Hardcore Zen by Brad Warner, which is a hilarious book. The audiobook is absolutely hilarious because he's recording it in his living room and you hear his cat, walking, that kind of thing. So here's the point about Zen, is that people, they talk about Zen and meditation or nirvana or all of these things as states that are somewhere out there, like they're floating somewhere. They're all woo-woo, new agey, like realign with the universe and all these things. And that makes us forget that all of the things that we're looking for, all of the things we want to achieve, like the optimum state that we want to be in, is always present. So the idea that there's not something outside of you that you're supposed to achieve or supposed to get to or supposed to reach, you always have it with you. It's always there. So I used to use the analogy of peeling the onion and getting to the core, but I realize now that doesn't work as well as what I've seen now, is that there's kind of like, there's a light that's shining, like there's a giant shining light bulb inside of each of us, but it's covered in all of these things that's keeping us from realizing that the light has been shining all the time. So I take a kind of, so that sounds very inspiring, but in general life, I take a very nihilistic approach to Zen of just learn to love your boring life. I love that idea, learn to love your boring life. The idea of the fact that you even have the notion that any life, any part of life can be boring, can be unpleasing, like, it's just absolutely astounding. The fact that you're even a human being alive, experiencing this amazing manifestation of the universe, that's where it starts to sound woo-woo again. But anyway, so, if you look at the math behind being a human being, if you look at the insane amount of like random stuff that has had to happen, all the stuff that could have gone wrong for you to even exist, and then you're finally there, and then you go, I don't like this life. This life is boring. I want another life. So what I've learned from this book of Hardcore Zen and from Zen practice and from talking to all of these spiritual people with a lot of ideas about reaching future states or going to a higher place or reaching nirvana or afterlife, just makes me go, what if we're already there, but we're ignoring it? What if you could just wake up to the reality of the fact that this life is the only life that we're living. This is not the practice round. All of this amazing stuff is going on right now, but we've been conditioned or we are afraid or whatever, for whatever reason, we're not realizing it. So being present with actual life, waking up to the reality of the fact that this life is amazing for every second that it's there, including all of the bad stuff. The glory of misery is also glory, that we're supposed to, like, there's nothing you're not supposed to feel, you're not supposed to experience, and everything is allowed to be there, and you can train yourself to kind of bask in the glory of every moment. But it's extremely difficult, which is what the whole lecture was about. Zen is very difficult. Yeah. So that's the way I look at it. The way I look at it is that I don't care if there's an afterlife. I don't care if there's, things like reincarnation, because if reincarnation exists, we are currently in an afterlife of a previous life. Yeah. So instead of looking for the next afterlife, let's just enjoy this one. But I'm not interested in any kind of afterlife thinking that is keeping me from enjoying actual life.
Exactly.
So wake up, face reality, and learn to love your boring fucking life.
What a great place to end the show on. I've been waiting to ask you where I can pre-order your book and tell me a bit more about Mind Lift Learning, because it's going on my pre-order list right now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks so much for that. Yeah, so I've written a book called Mind Lift. It is mental fitness for the modern mind. It's about taking the skill-based approach of understanding how your brain works, how your physiology works, and how you can influence the different states that you want to get to. There's nothing particularly new or groundbreaking in the book in terms of content, but I've attempted to structure existing ideas in a way that actually help people actually finally fucking do it and glean it into your life. And instead of thinking that it's something difficult, something complicated, it's something that you can actually start doing right now. You could do something to improve your mental state. So it's about taking responsibility and about taking this very, I think, sensible approach to personal improvement that is skill-based, to work on building a skill, becoming good at guiding your own personal improvement. So anyway, if people want to find out about that, they can go to mindliftlearning.com or mindliftbook.com, which should be active by the time this show goes up. There's an audiobook. It's going to be available everywhere where books are sold by October 25th. This is the launch date, so October 25th, 2016, for the people in the future who are listening to this on their flying cars and Tesla jetpacks. And hi, future people. But anyway, so the book should be available everywhere come October 25th, and there's a very good chance that the pre-order is also going to be up by the time this show airs, because I'm currently just in the process of recording the audiobook, doing the final edits, making sure that everything is ready for launch as soon as possible.
Cool.
So thank you for asking that question and letting me promote my book.
No, I wouldn't do it if it's something that I didn't believe in, and if it wasn't something that I personally kind of resonated with. So I honestly, genuinely, sincerely, I can't wait for it to come out and to read it and listen to it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, me too. It's just an amazing. I have such an amazing sense of gratitude for the fact that I get to do this, all of this, that I get to speak to you, that people listen to this, and that they get in. So if anybody's listening to this and there's anything in you that's resonated with you, just please find me, on Twitter or Instagram. You can find me at Kasper's Focus, or Facebook, Mind Lift Learning. There's nothing that I love more than getting in touch with the people that have somehow done anything with the work that I've done. I have this book out, and people are getting in touch with me about how it's helped them. I have this app that is also coming out in English now that has a 30-day challenge of optimizing mental fitness. And, people are sending me videos of what they've done with it, how they've incorporated it in their lives. I run these experiential retreats where I take people out into hard nature and learn them how to real wild and to focus and to be with the cold and all that things. And then people, they get in touch with me afterwards. And I am so intensely humbled and grateful for the fact that, they've done something with that. I'm like, really? Like, you've actually done something with something I told you and it's helped you? That's amazing. So, I'm not even saying all those things to promote them, but just to express my gratitude for the fact that people have been listening to me for over an hour and that I get to do this. It's absolutely baffling to me how all of this is possible and all of this is happening. I really love my boring life.
Like, Kasper, this has been so much fun. I'd love to do another round at some point, because this has really resonated with me. So thank you so much for jumping on the show.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and I'd absolutely love to be back. I've had a blast. Thank you for all of those very interesting questions that forced me to think about myself.
Good stuff. Well, I'm glad I could do that for you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast. To find show notes, unique downloads, and more information on the Academy, head to alphamovement.co/blog. And if you enjoyed this episode, head over to iTunes and subscribe. And whilst you're there, please leave me a 5-star review. And don't forget, you can follow me, Tom Foxley, on social media all over the place, or you can find more about the Alpha Movement at facebook.com/Alpha Movement Official.